price tags and putting them back on the merchandise. It wasn't until about 3 years passed when this dealer retired and we had to vacate the area, did we move a wall unit away from the wall and found all of the missing price tags. Were all stacked up in a little stack and neatly stacked and hidden behind a 3-shelf display case. There was no way they could have been put there, but there they were.
Wow.
So we had, as I mentioned earlier, a visit from a paranormal society, and they had talked about something in the corner over here. So they had a chance to come together. I think there were 7 of them. They had, you would know more about it, they had lit the sage, and they did a cleansing, and they said a few things about it. And after they were done, I walked over and said, "Is there a problem over here?" And one of them turned to me and said, "No, not anymore." So and I said, "Well, what had you sensed?" And they said, "Well, there's 2 little girls that inhabit this area over here, and they're rather mischievous. Have you noticed anything out of the ordinary?" And so tying those 2 things together, they were probably taking the tags and hiding them just to play around. So those are kind of the things that go on. There are people who said that they have caught glimpses of shadows. Yeah, and you can see the place is well lit. Yeah, they'll catch shadows as they walk through, or they'll hear voices or pick up vibrations off of the antiques in here. So, urban legend, I don't know, you know, but you know, we have heard from the other owners, particularly the sporting goods store.
I was going to ask you about the sporting goods.
They were in here one night, and one of the fellows was here, and there was no one else in the place. And he said he looked up from the counter and saw a catcher's glove lift off of one of the display racks, float out, and then drop on the floor.
Wow.
And he said he was absolutely stunned. He says a few months later, he was in here and he heard somebody call his name out and say, "Look over here." And as he turned to look at the window shattered into a million pieces right before his eyes.
Oh, wow. You're talking about the window over here?
Right over here in the corner.
Wow.
And there was no reason for it. Nobody had thrown anything, no problem, but someone had called his name and looked in that direction.
And this was during the time it was this Orange Sporting
Goods store. We had a fellow come in, as you imagine, there's so much history and connectivity in Old Town Orange. People have lived here for many, many generations. They'll come in and share stories with you.
Yeah.
And we had a fellow come in and said, "You know, I used to come here when it was the Orange Sporting Goods store. I used to deliver for UPS." He says, "I remember going downstairs, on my way downstairs to deliver a package full of uniforms." He says, about 4 steps down, I felt 2 hands on my back as they shoved me down the stairs.
Oh, wow.
He said, I felt the 10 fingers on my back, and he says, I ended up in a clump on the floor. He says, and as soon as I looked up, there was no one there. He said so.
Now, did he, if he reported this to anybody when it happened, or you just get the heck out of here?
Well, on the way back out, he said to the people at the counter, "There's something going on in here." You know, somebody just physically pushed me down the stairs. So, but the downstairs has its own unique atmosphere. We'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay, great. Well, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about haunted antiques. There are several experts in the paranormal arena that say that certain items can hold energies, or actual spirits can be attached to them. What is your take on that? Have you heard anything about that, or do you feel that's a...
Well, I've been in the industry now for over 20 years, and but I've always enjoyed antiques. The longer I'm at it, the more open-minded that I am to it. I have to agree with it. I know that we all have things at home that we cherish. We have things that are handed down from family members that are heirlooms that we cherish. You look around and you'll see things that were cherished by people that are no longer here with us. Family heirlooms, beds that people had births in, beds that people passed away in, china cabinets that were cherished possessions, things that people would work for years before they had enough money to buy, and that have energy, and they took care of them. That's why you see quality antiques the way you see them here, is because people cherished them, they earned them, they took care of them, and I have to think a lot of that energy is still attached to them. So I'm a believer. And the more I've been around, the more I see it.
Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take the interview downstairs in a minute, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the activity that happens downstairs in the basement.
Okay.
There's also the back corner that looks like, well, we'll be down there in a second, so we'll be able to check that and see what that looks like. Well, we're down here in the infamous basement of Chapman Antiques. This is where most of the activity takes place, and we're going to talk to Dennis a little bit more about some of the happenings that have been taking place down here. It's kind of spooky being down here filming tonight, but tell us a little bit about what folks have experienced down here.
Well, welcome to our paranormal ground zero here for us. You're right, this is where most of the activity takes place. We have customers that will come up and tell us that they're sensing things down here, they're seeing things down here, they're feeling spooky things down here. And they'll stop at the counter on the way out the door, sometimes at a run, letting us know that they won't be back downstairs again because it's just too spooky.
Wow. Now, what did you, you told me a story a little while ago, or actually me and Dennis had a talk about it. A couple weeks ago, I think I came in, and there was a recent encounter, I guess. There was a man and his wife down here, and something happened?
Yeah, just about a few weeks ago, we had a couple that came in and looked around. They were down here for a while, and as they made their way back up, the wife was very hesitant in staying in the building. She had him by the arm and was trying to get her husband to leave the building. And he sort of slowed down and gave me a grin, and I said, "Is everything okay?" And he said, "Well, we had an experience downstairs just now." He said, "I was down here talking to my wife." He says, "and I was only just a foot or so away from her." He says, "and something or somebody walked between us and took and shoved my shoulder and physically moved me away." And he says, my wife saw it, her eyes got big. He said, "I thought it was kind of cool, but it scared her, and I guess I should be scared too, so we have to leave."
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, what about the staff? Does anyone have to come down here at night for anything, or are you guys pretty much out of here at at closing time, or?
Well, I'll be honest with you. We have a couple of the ladies that help us out here that are reluctant to come down here by themselves. But for the most part, we have to close up, so we always come down and turn the lights off one by one, and as you can see, it can get real dark real fast and real spooky. So I don't have a problem with it. So far I'm okay with it. But, some of the staff do sense it down here.
Now, about a year ago, I came down with a paranormal group. It was an informal investigation, and I think we had a sensitive, and then we had I think a psychic that was with us, and they caught a couple of things. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know in particular, right behind us, they sensed an Asian woman, or?
Yes. They said they had sensed a Japanese woman that didn't speak English, I understood, but cowering in the corner over here, very reluctant to show herself, and would peek behind the furniture watching what was going on. In communicating with her, she didn't speak English, but they could tell by the essence and the expression about her that she was cowering, she was hiding over in the corner. And one of your sensitives said, "Well, it's okay, no one means you no harm, you're fine down here. Come out to talk to us." But they said she was reluctant and just continued to peek around a piece of the furniture. They could sense she was there.
Now, there's some interesting stories that you told me before. The back corner of this building, we'll take a look at it a little bit later on, and we'll turn the lights on so we can see what it looks like back there. But it's kind of it's kind of shabby back there. It's a little opening. It looks like it's kind of boarded up with antiques right now. But what to your understanding, what was that used for in the corner? Or what did you find back there when you guys moved in here?
We have heard from people, as I had mentioned earlier, there's people who have lived here in Orange all of their life, and so they really know a lot about the history. And one of the stories that came up was that during the Second World War, when the Americans would capture German prisoner of war, they would bring them to the United States, and they were allowed to use prisoner of war labor for non-military duty.
Okay.
And at that time, Orange was still very much agricultural. A lot of the folks who worked in the fields were off in the different theaters fighting the war. So the folks who owned the fields here would have a chance to bring the German, particularly the German submariners, the submariners of the German Navy, here and put them in the fields to help pick whatever fruits and vegetables were coming right at the time. Well, of course, prisoner of war has been particularly very intelligent Germans were beyond, that was beneath them working in the field.